Hello, this is Tony Blazer for the Motocross Vault presented by Blinzall. If you're in the market for some high-quality racing oil for your two-stroke or four, make sure you go to blinzall.com and use our discount code VAULT20 to save 20% at checkout. Thank you for all the support. Hello and welcome back to the Motocross Vault. My name is Tony Blazer, and what this video is going to cover is a look back at Honda's 1998 CR250. This is the second year for the all-new aluminum frame, which had debuted in 1997. A really iconic machine, a very important machine in so many ways. I mean, today, pretty much all the Japanese, in fact, I think probably all the Japanese motocross machines are, at least above the 80 class, are aluminum framed. And this is the first kind of manufacturer to take the plunge here, Honda, in 1997, and move toward the aluminum frames. Obviously, aluminum had been used on street bikes for many years, but there was a lot of concern as to whether or not the durability of the aluminum frame would hold up for motocross use. And Honda kind of proved that you could use it in 1997, but this first generation of aluminum frame, I think they were very concerned about the reliability of it. They did not want it to break, did not want to have a lot of bad press about that, so they kind of overbuilt the chassis. Here in 1998, they made some changes here designed to try and, I guess, alleviate some of those concerns and complaints people had the year before. They really just kind of messed with the suspension. There wasn't a whole lot they could do to the frame. The basic frame design, it would have to wait until 2000 until they had a complete redesign to kind of address some of those major concerns. But they did make some changes here in 1998 to address some of those concerns. The machine is really very similar. If you look at it on the outside, they're almost impossible to tell the two apart. They're very, very similar in appearance. Bodywork's all the same and what have you, except for some changes as far as the graphics. But there were some changes to the frame and mostly suspension settings. The motor is completely the same here in 1998, but that was a great thing. In 1997, pretty much from 92 until 99, Honda had the best motor in the class. They were excellent engines. In terms of mid to top end power, Kawasaki had some great low end mid-range engines, but Honda really owned the class in terms of horsepower at the peak. And this machine was well known for its strong top end pull. Very, very well liked by experts and even novices. I had a 96 CR, and it was an excellent machine in most respects. The suspension wasn't that great, but I've ridden these aluminum frame bikes, and I never really felt that comfortable with it. I've ridden a 97 and a 99. I have not ridden the 98, but the bike felt extremely stiff, extremely rigid. I think if you're Ezra Lusk or somebody who was fast enough to make the most of the chassis, you could probably make it work. But for the average person, it was probably a little overbuilt, not very comfortable on the track. It kind of wore you out. Also, the vibration, man, the vibration was so bad through those things. I remember it just, my hands would be tingling after riding. I ended up buying a 99 125 CR with the same basic chassis, and I just never really felt comfortable on it. That said, love the looks of these bikes. They were certainly important machines and certainly groundbreaking machines in many ways. If you like the sort of thing, make sure you check out some of the other videos I've done. I've done several retrospectives on the CR250, including a history of the entire Honda CR250 line from 73 through the last year in 2007. Several shootouts and several individual reviews of ATVs and off-road machines as well. If you like to support what I do, I have Motocross Vault merch available. I have several designs, including several Honda designs, and you can find those in my Teespring store. I'll put a link here in the description and also a card in the video. If you'd like to support what I do here at the Motocross Vault, I would certainly appreciate that. So here, without further ado, is a look back at the 1998 Honda CR250R. In 1997, Honda kicked off the start of the aluminum motocross chassis movement with the introduction of its groundbreaking all-new CR250R. Today, it's hard to overstate the amount of excitement and anticipation surrounding the introduction of Honda's alloy-framed wonder. At the time, Honda was on an incredible win streak with their CR250, dominating the professional race standings for more than a decade. Factory riders Rick Johnson, Jeff Stanton, Jean-Michel Bale, and Jeremy McGrath took Honda's 250s to victory in every Supercross title from 1988 through 1996, with several outdoor titles as well going to the Red Machines. This era of domination made them the bikes to own in the minds of many, despite some glaring inadequacies on the suspension front. Initially, the reviews for Honda's all-new aluminum frame machine were glowing. Magazine editors loved its spacey looks and praised its stout chassis and rocket-fast motor. Early reviews had many pit pundits thinking Honda had hit a home run with their all-new machine, but those opinions began to shift once testers and consumers spent a bit more time with the machine. Early praise for its quote-unquote pro-ready chassis turned to grumbles over its lack of compliance and harsh suspension performance. The motor and looks remained standouts, but the harsh chassis, concrete seat, incessant vibration, and disappointing suspension made the 1997 CR250 a bike easy to fall for, but hard to live with. For Honda, most of the complaints levied at the all-new CR could be traced back to decisions made in the pursuit of chassis reliability. While aluminum frames had been used on street machines for over a decade, no other major manufacturer had attempted to bring them to the off-road world. The unique demands of off-road use presented several challenges to Honda's engineers, and it was felt that preventing a high-profile failure was more important than providing the all-new CR250 with the old bike's more compliant feel. This decision led Honda to err on the side of durability and beef up the 97 CR's chassis to the point where it adversely affected its handling. On the reliability front, this approach worked, with the new chassis proving to be extremely rugged. Frame failures were rare, and Honda proved that aluminum could be used for motocross frame construction without any significant penalties in reliability. Where the picture became less clear was on the performance front. The ultra-stiff character that made aluminum perfect for road racing applications proved less advantageous off-road. The 97 CR's chassis transmitted every rock, bump, and hump directly to the rider's hands and backside, and made the machine extremely tiring to ride. While the reviews for the 97 CR250 turned out to be quite mixed, its popularity in the showrooms was unquestionable. Riders snapped up the alloy frame CRs in droves, largely based on hype and Honda's reputation for winning. Bold in design, beautiful to look at, and impeccably built, the 97 CR250R was not the bike many had hoped it would be, but it did prove that aluminum could be a viable choice for motocross chassis design. In 1998, Honda's focus shifted to the 125 division with an all-new CR125R. The redesigned Tiddler featured a version of the 250's alloy chassis and a revamped 5-speed motor. Long the powerhouse of the 125 division, the hype for the all-new Red 125 was only slightly tamped down by the trepidation some felt about the move to aluminum for the chassis. On the 250 front, the R&D department's focus on the 125 meant a season of minor refinements for the 250. Long the gold standard of deuce and a half performance, the CR's 249cc power plant carried over largely unchanged from 1997. In use since 1992, Honda's composite racing valve design was famous for its long pull and blistering mid-range performance. For 1998, Honda revamped jetting on the 38mm Keihin PowerJet carburetor, added a new stainless steel clutch cable for improved durability, and repositioned the countershaft sprocket to better align with the drive sprocket in the rear. Aside from these minor updates, the CR's motor was identical to the year before. For 1998, Honda's main focus was improving the handling and suspension feel of the CR. The new frame had proven durable, and the bike was well suited for hard chargers, but most riders below the Pro class found the machine's harsh character off-putting. The new frame also exhibited a vagueness in the front end that was foreign to most riders accustomed to Honda's traditional turning prowess. With that in mind, the engineers made a few significant changes aimed at improving the CR's handling and reducing its harsh feel. First up was an all-new Showa twin-chamber fork for the front end. The new fork increased travel by 9mm and added a plethora of friction-reducing tricks to reduce stiction and improve its action. The springs were polished to reduce friction internally, and the interior tubes were subjected to a liquid honing process to ensure they moved more freely. A molybdenum coating was added to the inner surfaces of the outer tubes to reduce binding and further free up the fork's movement. A new cartridge design featured a freer flowing piston and reduced binding by allowing the spring to rotate within the fork as it was compressed. New settings reduced compression damping slightly, and a lighter spring was added to provide a smoother ride. In the rear, an all-new shock was added that once again increased travel slightly. The new Showa damper was 14.5mm longer and featured 5.8mm more shock travel than 1997. Paired with the all-new shock was a redesigned linkage that featured a flatter curve for 1998. The new linkage was designed to be slightly stiffer initially and more compliant as the shock reached the end of its travel. This, combined with lighter damping settings and a softer spring, was designed to bring back some plushness to the CR's rear suspension action. In addition to the new suspension, Honda revamped the CR's chassis quite extensively. The frame remained crafted out of 7000 series aluminum in a twin-spar configuration, but the geometry was all new for 1998. The new chassis featured a steeper caster, shorter trail, and reduced wheelbase to improve turning. The new frame also enlarged the lightning holes in the steering gusset by 4mm and revised some of the welding methods to bring back a little bit of feel to the chassis. A new subframe used thinner walled tubing, and a new seat featured a softer foam to increase the rider comfort in the rear. The swing arm was redesigned to work with the revised linkage and frame, and featured a 1.5mm thicker cross brace to prevent twisting under heavy loads. Aside from the softer seat foam and new graphics, the CR's bodywork remained unchanged from 1997. The wheels, brakes, and controls were all carryovers as well, with the CR continuing to offer the finest fit and finish in the class. On the track, the 1998 CR250 remained a wickedly fast but flawed machine. As in the year before, its motor was its greatest asset, with novices and pros alike praising its awesome output and endless pull. Down low, there was not a lot going on, but once the CR hit the mid-range, it was all fire and brimstone until the rider backed off or the CR was at the front. Some riders preferred the Kawasaki KX's beefy low-end blast to the Honda's shrieking top-end pull, but both were brutally effective on the track. On slick surfaces, the CR's hard hit and lack of torque could be a hindrance, but as long as there was traction, the Honda was the fastest gun in the West. When combined with its flawless shifting, bulletproof clutch, and unimpeachable record for reliability, the CR had what many consider to be the perfect 250 power package in 1998. Where things once again went pear-shaped for the Honda was in the chassis department. The frame and suspension changes aimed at softening its personality did not turn out to be particularly effective. The chassis remained very sensitive to track conditions and proved the most finicky of all the Big Five to set up. Settings that worked at one track fell completely wrong at another, and the Honda Pilot was left chasing sag and suspension settings far more than on the other machines in the class. If you did get the setup right, the Honda was a decent handler, but its days as the carving knife of motocross were in the past. In slow corners, the front end exhibited a push, and at speed, it was still a bit of a shaker. No one declared it an absolute roach, but it was far from the best handling machine in the class. Some of this chassis and precision had to do with the CR suspension, which continued to disappoint despite its many upgrades for 1998. The new fork settings were too soft initially, which caused them to dive under braking and hang down in their travel. This upset the chassis' balance and caused the front end to feel harsh as it moved too quickly into the heavier part of its damping curve. There was notably less stiction than in the past, and the forks exhibited less of the harshness Honda had become famous for. But on hard hits, it blew through its travel and left many wanting stiffer springs at a minimum. Pros were particularly unhappy with the stock settings, but even novices felt that Honda had gone too far in the pursuit of more compliance. With some stiffer springs and a bit of oil fiddling, the forks could be made passable, but even with these upgrades, the CR's legs were some of the least popular in the class in '98. Out back, the story was much the same, with the new settings delivering an overly soft and uncontrolled ride. The shock's light damping caused it to move excessively in turns and upset the chassis' balance. The shock extended too much under braking and squatted abruptly under acceleration. If you tried to dial up more damping to get the movement under control, then the shock became harsh in action. The alloy chassis imparted a dead feel to the rear, and the CR thudded into obstacles that machines like the KX floated over. Even lighter and slower riders commented on the Honda's subpar shock action, and nearly everyone felt the CR needed stiffer springs and a revalve to be competitive. If you were slow and under 150 pounds, then the stock suspension was raceable, but for everyone else, both ends were going to need some serious work. On the detailing front, the Honda remained the class of the field in 1998. The bodywork fit perfectly, wore well, and looked great aside from the ugly gray smears the aluminum frame transferred to the side plates. The alloy frame also looked new far longer than the painted steel competition. The brakes worked flawlessly and delivered the most bite and best feel in the class. The stock steel bars were remarkably tough and stronger than many aftermarket aluminum alternatives. Likewise, the Honda's forged levers were of higher quality than the cast components found on many of the other brands, and could withstand a great deal of abuse without snapping or failing. The grips were also quite comfortable, and many people did not feel the need to replace them until they were damaged or worn out. While the clutch lever's shape was quite comfortable as well, its pull left some riders looking for a hand exerciser. It was far heavier than the ultralight Suzuki's, but its durability was without peer. As long as you kept the fluid fresh, the Honda's clutch and transmission were the most durable in the class. On the not great side of the ledger were the CR's annoying vibration, heavy feel, and lack of overall comfort. The vibration through the chassis was a constant annoyance, and the new softer seat was still closer to a block of concrete than a lazy boy. The wide frame and unique chassis feel also made the bike feel bigger and heavier than the scale would indicate. Despite being the lightest machine in the class and undercutting some competitors by as much as 10 pounds, the CR felt like one of the heaviest. This was not easily addressed, but at least an aftermarket seat and a switch to the CR500R's rubber-mounted top clamp could do a lot to reduce the tingle and improve the backside comfort on the machine. Overall, the 1998 CR250R proved to be a disappointment in many respects. It still offered the motor of doom, but its alloy chassis and revamped suspension were still a work in progress. No other machine on the track was as fast, well-built, or cutting edge, but that edge cut both ways. The alloy frame that captured riders' imaginations the year before was still a bit too big, bulky, and overbuilt, and Honda's efforts at toning down its harshness with softer suspension settings turned out to backfire. The bike could certainly win in the right hands, but for most riders, the 1998 CR250R was a bit too far out on the bleeding edge to be the perfect motocross weapon. So there you have it. That's a look back at the 1998 CR250R, a machine that had probably a lot going for it in terms of performance for pros. Excellent engine, certainly a very, very sturdy chassis, but I think the suspension settings were totally out of whack this year for what most people were looking for. It was a little too soft. I think they were trying to basically put a Band-Aid on that complaints from the year before. People were saying the bike was too stiff and too hard to ride, and by going soft with the suspension, I think they probably actually made it worse. Like I said, with some proper setup, you could certainly go fast on this bike. They were very competitive in the right hands, but the handling and the overall feel, I think, was inferior to the earlier steel frame models of the early 90s. If you like this sort of thing, make sure you check out some of the other videos I've done. I've done all kinds of retrospectives on other motocross machines, off-road, and ATVs. If you could share on social media, let your friends know, I would very much appreciate it. Help grow the channel. So until we meet again, this is Tony Blazer from Motocross Vault. Keep the rubber side down. Peace.